Imagine a bridge right now, perhaps a suspension bridge spanning the Bosphorus Strait, or maybe San Francisco's iconic Golden Gate Bridge. Now, make that bridge 20 times longer. Then sever it from the land and place it in the middle of the ocean, thousands of meters of depth below, 10-meter-high storm waves above, and the freezing Pacific cold reaching -40 degrees in winter all around. It is precisely at this point that history's wildest engineering dream takes center stage: the Pacific Floating Highway. This project is not just a bridge, it is the largest front in humanity's war against the ocean. A continental highway system composed of massive floating platforms designed to connect Asia with North America, Tokyo with Los Angeles, and Beijing with Vancouver via land. Spanning thousands of kilometers across the Pacific, this structure shatters every known boundary in engineering history and rewrites some of them entirely.
I'm currently about 400 kilometers off the coast of Tokyo, right in the middle of the Pacific. The wind is so strong that it's hard to even hold the microphone. When I look toward the horizon, I see neither land nor any lights, just endless gray water. And the engineers tell me that right here, in this chaos, humanity's greatest infrastructure project will be.
The project's total length is approximately 8,800 kilometers. That's more than 1/5 of the Earth's circumference. If we laid out the steel cables to be used on this route end to end, they would stretch far enough to reach the moon and back 3 times. The amount of concrete to be used beneath the platforms would be enough to build 78 Burj Khalifas. The numbers are mind-boggling. But why this project now? Why does it seem so impossible? And why do some engineers still say it's doable? Every wild dream begins with a small proof of concept. The inspiration for the Pacific Floating Highway, however, lies in an unexpected place, in the middle of the sea, on an artificial island made of concrete and steel in Osaka Bay, Japan, Kansai International Airport. When it opened in 1994, the world hailed it as the 7th wonder of engineering. But the story of this airport begins long before its grand opening, with a profound existential crisis faced by the engineers. Because Osaka Bay was the worst possible location engineers could have chosen to build an airport. The ground consisted of thousands of years of soft marine sediment. It would sink, compress, and retreat with every load. In short, the ground was trying to swallow everything with an insatiable hunger.
I'm currently in the archives room reviewing old construction records for Kansai International Airport. The documents in front of me are incredible. When construction began in 1987, the project engineers estimated that the platform would sink 2 meters over the first 5 years. Do you know what actually happened? The platform sank 8 meters. 8 meters. That's the height of a 3-story building. Instead of panicking, what did the engineers do? They redesigned the system. It is this flexibility,
Construction workers in Kansai have implemented a controlled subsidence system on a large scale for the first time in the world. More than 900 steel columns, each adjustable independently, were raised one by one as the ground subsided, maintaining the runway's level. This system was akin to a musician constantly tuning an instrument with thousands of strings. Only the instrument that couldn't be tuned was the size of an island, with the Pacific Ocean beneath it. But Kansai's true test came in 1998. The Japan Meteorological Agency reported that Typhoon Jebi was heading toward the bay, a Category 5 typhoon, wind speeds of 220 kilometers per hour. When engineers looked at their computer models, what they saw horrified them. The waves would wash over the runway. The platform could have sunk, but it didn't. The platform withstood the typhoon's full fury, without splitting, without collapsing, sinking only a few centimeters. This was the greatest lesson the engineers of the Floating Pacific Highway learned. You don't have to fight the ocean. If you learn to accept it, it will carry you. Now we move a few thousand kilometers north from the scene, to one of humanity's most brutal landscapes, the Bering Strait. A strait that separates Alaska from Russia, with winter temperatures plunging to -60 degrees, rocky shores, and waters that freeze solid for 6 months without seeing the sun. A strait that looms over history like a nightmare. The idea of crossing the Bering Strait is not a new one. In 1905, American engineer Joseph Strauss envisioned a railway tunnel crossing the Pacific. the same Strauss who would go on to build the Golden Gate Bridge 30 years later. That project never got off the ground because the numbers were nightmarish. Even the narrowest part of the Bering Strait is 85 kilometers wide. Water temperatures drop to -2 degrees in the winter. Glaciers flow in massive masses, crushing everything in their path.
I'm currently in a coastal town near Nome, at the westernmost point of Alaska. The wind is biting like a knife. A local resident named Nanook told me, "Nature reigns here. We are guests." Keeping those words in mind, I look out at the sea. There, hidden among the clouds, the silhouette of Russia's Chukotka Peninsula is visible. The distance between them is perhaps 3/4 of an hour by air.
The seabed beneath the Bering Strait, however, is a different kind of enemy. Permafrost, permanently frozen soil, extends hundreds of meters deep. This soil is extremely sensitive to temperature changes. When you build a structure on it, the structure's heat melts the soil, causing ground subsidence. Many buildings in Siberia have collapsed because of this, and roads have buckled and become impassable. Engineers have been grappling with how to build a bridge or dig a tunnel across the Bering Strait for decades, but every calculation ultimately leads to the same conclusion. The cost is astronomical, and the logistics are nearly impossible. This is where the Pacific Floating Highway project comes into play and changes the game. If you can't build a bridge and can't dig a tunnel, what do? You build floating platforms, structures without foundations, systems flexible enough to deflect icebergs, intelligent enough to withstand storms, with rhythmic movements in sync with the ocean. So, how exactly do these floating platforms work? Imagine this: a concrete platform on the surface of the sea, with massive air-filled steel cylinders beneath it, just like a boat floating. But this boat is the size of 3 soccer fields. Each platform is connected to its neighbor via special flexible joints. These joints move in sync with the rhythm of the waves, allowing for a few degrees of angular displacement between the platforms. This system is known in engineering as semi-submersible platform technology. The oil industry has been using this technology for decades in offshore drilling platforms. But the engineers behind the Pacific Highway are taking this technology to an entirely different scale, because an oil platform can stand on its own. A highway, however, consists of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of interconnected platforms, and every link in this chain must be able to move independently while maintaining the integrity of the overall system.
I'm at a marine engineering research center in Bering, Norway. In front of me is a small-scale model of the Pacific Highway. Dr. Astrid Lindqvist is showing me how the model works. It's a network of floating platforms designed to stabilize marine energy generators. She activates a wave simulator, and the mini platforms in the tank begin to sway. But they don't collapse. The connection points flex to absorb the wave. The secret is here. We're designing the platform not as rigid, but as living. We're not fighting the ocean, we're dancing with it.
Underneath each platform are sensors that actively monitor wave movement. These sensors are connected to artificial intelligence systems that operate using real-time data. Is a storm approaching? The system preemptively stabilizes the platforms. Is there an unusual wave? The tension at the connection points is adjusted within milliseconds. This structure represents the intersection of 21st century engineering and biomimicry, because this system is actually inspired by the body of a jellyfish. A jellyfish does not resist the wind, the current, or the waves. It flows with them, and that is why no storm can destroy it. Behind every great structure lies a name, an architect, an engineer, a visionary. But the true cost of every great structure is paid by thousands of people who are never mentioned. For Kansai International Airport, 10,000 workers labored for years in the middle of the bay, amidst the waves. A third of these workers, who came from outside Japan, worked in temperatures as low as -10 degrees in the winter and as high as 38 degrees in the summer. Some fell into the sea from exhaustion. Some never made it home. During the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge, in defiance of the engineering standards of the time, Chief Engineer Joseph Strauss stretched a massive safety net beneath the bridge to save the workers' lives. This net saved 19 workers from certain death throughout the construction process. These men formed a group among themselves called the Halfway to Hell Club. Forming such a club for workers building in the middle of the Pacific would be even more meaningful, because beneath them, there won't be a net, only a dead ocean thousands of meters deep.
I'm currently at the training center of a Dutch offshore construction company. Here, engineers and technicians who will eventually work on
The young woman next to me, Lila, is a 26-year-old marine engineer.
Why did you choose this profession, I ask?
Because here, every day, you're faced with the truly impossible. Yeah. And when you make the impossible possible, the rest of the world changes. Any engineer who hears this will understand. This is the spirit that will build the Pacific Highway.
An estimated 300,000 to 500,000 people will work on the construction of the Pacific Highway. That's the population of a city. These people won't just be engineers and workers. They'll include medical teams living on platforms amid the waves, logistics coordinators, meteorologists, and mental health support staff. Because working on the open sea is not just a physical challenge, it's a mental one too. Spending months out at sea without seeing land on the horizon transforms a person. Will you lose yourself? Or will you find your human resolve, the world's most solid foundation, right here, in the midst of all this chaos? A storm in the Pacific is not merely a meteorological event. It is a matter of existence. This ocean, where an average of 25 tropical cyclones form each year, produces the world's harshest weather conditions. Do you remember Typhoon Haiyan, which struck the Philippines in 2013? Wind speeds reached 315 kilometers per hour. Waves exceeded 15 meters. This typhoon wiped 300,000 homes off the map. Pacific Highway platforms must be able to withstand such a system. Engineers are developing two different strategies to address this issue. The first involves processing data before the platforms feel the hurricanes. Satellite imagery and AI-based weather forecasting systems will detect major storms weeks in advance. This will allow platforms to be pre-positioned, cargo ships to be moved to safe harbors, and critical connection points to be reinforced. The second strategy is far more revolutionary, moving the platforms along with the storm. Special connection systems and dynamic ballast tanks designed to absorb wave energy will allow a hurricane to distribute its energy along the platform. Just like an artificial willow, it sways back and forth in the storm, but its roots hold firm.
I'm currently in the simulation room at the Japan Marine Research Center. On a large screen, a simulation is running showing a segment of the Pacific Highway being hit by a Category 5 typhoon.
I'm watching. Waves are pounding the platforms, systems are shaking, and some systems are triggering alarms. But the structure is holding up.
Just couldn't watch.
Our design isn't trying to defeat nature, it speaks nature's language. These words.
Every era has its own impossible feat. In the Middle Ages, it was Gothic cathedrals. People said, "Stone can't reach that high. God won't allow it." In the 19th century, it was the Panama Canal. People said, "Connecting two oceans is God's work." In the 20th century, it was going to the moon. People said, "No living human can enter that void." And every time, a few crazy engineers, a few visionary leaders, and thousands of nameless heroes threw the word no into the dustbin of history. The Pacific Floating Highway is, for now, a dream. Maybe a pilot project in 20 years. Maybe a construction site in 50 years. Maybe in 100 years, your grandchildren will drive on this highway and realize that you watched this video and thought it was impossible.
Finally, here I am, in the middle of the Pacific. All around me is water. Thousands of miles of water, but I see this water.
Out here, in the middle of the Pacific, there is only water. But now I understand it differently. It is not empty space, it is opportunity. Here, in the middle of the Pacific, there is nothing but water. No land, no certainty. But this water is not just a barrier anymore. In the middle of the Pacific, there is only water. Endless, quiet, waiting.
The Pacific Floating Highway, beyond the impossible, humanity's greatest dance. The point where the ocean meets engineering, the wind meets steel, and imagination meets calculation. This road doesn't exist yet, but one day it will, because a civilization that stops dreaming such dreams has, in truth, already died.